A king traded his crown for a beggar's tunic and walked into his own kingdom to find it had been starving for 2 years.
The children's bowls have been empty for 2 days, Amara said. The grain storehouses are full. He took a breath inside his chest and asked, "Who did this?"
Hungry kings become great rulers. Greedy ministers build their palaces on the bones of their own people. History remembers who saved a kingdom.
Welcome to African Ruth Stories. Like, subscribe, and share for more.
In the Golden Kingdom of Nambara, the people believed that a king could hear a lie, even when it was whispered behind a stone wall. They believed King Maleko had inherited his father's courage, his mother's wisdom, and the eyes of a hawk. But there was one thing the people did not know. For 3 years, the king had been afraid, not afraid of war. Nambara's warriors were among the finest in the region, not afraid of the neighboring kingdoms, because every ruler who had threatened Nambara had eventually learned that its quiet hills hid an unbreakable people. King Maleko was afraid of being loved by a kingdom that was slowly dying. The rains had failed for 2 seasons. The river Senga had become a narrow ribbon of brown water. Millet fields cracked beneath the sun, and the wells that once reflected the moon now showed only darkness. At sunrise, mothers stood in long lines outside the public granaries. At sunset, they returned with empty baskets. Yet inside the palace, the royal council reported a different story. "The reserves are stable," announced Lord Kato, the king's chief minister, during the morning council. "The people are receiving sufficient grain. The drought is uncomfortable, but it is not dangerous." King Maleko looked across the carved table. Its surface was polished from generations of royal hands. Around it sat men in embroidered robes, men who had eaten breakfast that morning and would eat dinner that evening. "Not dangerous?" the king asked. Lord Cato bowed. "Your Majesty, fear spreads faster than famine. If we allow villagers to believe the situation is desperate, they will become desperate. Perhaps they are already desperate." The minister's expression did not change. "The palace has received no official report of widespread hunger." No official report. The words remained in the king's mind long after the council ended. That afternoon, Maleko climbed the western tower and looked beyond the palace walls. Nambara was famous for its red earth, its green hills, and the golden roofs of its market towns. From the tower, those colors had begun to fade. His personal guard, Captain Jabari, stood several paces behind him. "Tell me what you see," the king said. "Fields," Jabari answered carefully. "Villages, the northern road." "Do you see food?" Jabari lowered his eyes. The king turned. "That is what I thought." That night, Maleko entered the old armory beneath the palace. He removed his blue royal cloak, his rings, and the gold clasp that carried the symbol of the sunbird. From a wooden chest, he took a patched brown tunic, a dusty shawl, and a walking stick. Jabari stared at him. "Your Majesty, if the council learns this, the council has been telling me what they want me to hear. I am going to learn what the kingdom is actually saying. You cannot walk among the people without protection. I will have protection." "From whom?" Maleko tightened the cloth around his shoulder. "From the truth." Before dawn, the king slipped through a servant's gate disguised as a poor traveler named Mosi. He carried no sword, no royal seal, and no money. Only a small water gourd and a silent question. Why were the people starving while the palace granaries remained full? If you enjoy emotional royal stories with mystery, betrayal, and powerful life lessons, stay with this story until the end. The secret King Maleko discovered would change Nambara forever. The first village he reached was called Lulama. A signboard announced that it had once been a prosperous farming settlement. The word prosperous had been carved deeply into the wood, as if someone hoped the past could be preserved by force. Mosey entered the village near midday. No children were playing in the dust. No women were singing as they ground grain. At the center of the village stood a well surrounded by cracked clay pots. A woman knelt beside it, lowering a rope into the darkness. She pulled. The rope came up empty. She tried again. Mosey watched as she braced both feet against the stones and pulled until her hands trembled. Still, nothing came out of the well except a faint smell of wet earth. "Do you need help?" he asked. The woman looked over her shoulder. She was perhaps 28, though hunger and exhaustion made it difficult to guess her age. Her dark skin was warm beneath the dust, and her hair was braided close to her head, decorated with 3 small wooden beads. "I need water," she replied. "If you can pull water from an empty well, then yes, I need help." Her voice was dry, but her eyes were not cruel. "My name is Mosey. I am Amara." She returned to the rope. "Are you alone?" he asked. "Everyone is alone when the well is empty." The answer struck him more deeply than an accusation. A little boy appeared from behind a hut. He held his stomach and watched the king with suspicion. Amara noticed him. "Tano, come here." The boy approached slowly. "Have you eaten?" she asked. He shook his head. Amara opened a cloth bundle. Inside was a single roasted root, no larger than a man's hand. She broke it into 2 pieces and gave the larger piece to the boy. Mosey stared at the smaller piece in her palm. "Is that all you have?" "For now." "And you're giving most of it away?" Amara looked at him as though the question itself were strange. "The child is smaller than I am." The boy began eating quickly. Amara put the remaining piece into her mouth, chewed slowly, and then offered Mosey the last crumb that had fallen onto the cloth. He shook his head. "You look hungry," she said. "I am." "Then do not be proud in front of a crumb." For the first time that day, the disguised king smiled. Amara led him to a shade tree where several villagers rested. She introduced him as a traveler searching for work. No one asked too many questions. In a hungry village, people had little energy left for curiosity. Mosey learned that grain carts had not visited Lulema for almost 6 weeks. Yet every month, the villagers were forced to pay a water tax to the palace. "Water tax?" he asked. An old farmer named Bako lifted his empty cup. "The council says the tax pays for repairs to the wells." "Have the wells been repaired?" Bako laughed without humor. "The tax collector comes on a healthy horse. The water does not." Amara touched the old man's shoulder. "Do not speak too loudly." "Why?" Mosey asked. "Because the last man who complained was taken to the northern barracks." "Taken for complaining?" "Taken for asking where the grain went." King Maleko felt his hands close beneath the dusty sleeves. He had approved the water tax himself. Lord Cato had told him it would fund emergency wells. The king had signed the order in the belief that every coin would become water. Amara rose. "I have to visit the sick." Mosey followed her through a narrow lane between the huts. She entered a small room where a young mother lay beneath a thin blanket. A child slept beside her, breathing with difficulty. Amara crushed leaves in a bowl, mixed them with warm water, and placed the paste on the mother's forehead. "What medicine is that?" Mosey asked. "It is not enough medicine." "Then why use it?" "Because not enough is still more than nothing." She said it gently, but Maleko heard an entire kingdom inside those words. Before evening, a rider in a red sash entered the village. He carried the seal of the royal treasury. The villagers fell silent. The rider dismounted and called for the village headman. When Bako approached, the rider handed him a parchment. "Emergency contribution," he announced. "Every household must provide 2 measures of grain by tomorrow." The old farmer stared at him. "We have no grain." "Then sell your animals." "We have no animals." "Then sell your tools." Amara stepped forward. "There are children here." The rider looked her up and down. "And there is a kingdom to feed." "Which kingdom?" she asked. "The one outside these huts or the one inside the palace?" A dangerous silence fell. Mosey stepped between them before the rider could answer. "She is tired. Let us go." The rider pushed him hard. Mosey stumbled, but did not fall. Amara grabbed the king's arm. "Do not fight him." "Why not?" "Because people like him carry the king's authority." Maleko looked at the red-sashed rider. "Does the king know what he does?" Amara's eyes hardened. "If he does not know, he is foolish. If he knows, he is worse." The words struck the disguised king like a thrown stone. That night he slept beneath the shade tree while Amara sat nearby, guarding the villager's last water jar. She did not know that the man beside her was the king she had just condemned. He did not sleep. He listened to the coughing huts, the dry wind, and the quiet anger of people who had once trusted him. At dawn, he made a promise. Before he returned to the palace, he would discover where the kingdom's grain and water were going. For the next 5 days, Mosey traveled with Amara from village to village. He told himself he stayed because he needed answers. In truth, he stayed because every time he thought he had seen the worst, Amara found another person who needed help. She knew which roots reduced fever, which leaves soothed a burned child, and which old women could read the clouds better than any palace astronomer. She also knew how to listen. When people spoke, she did not interrupt them with promises. She let their pain finish its sentence. At Kembe, they found a line of villagers waiting beside a locked grain store. The storehouse bore the royal sunbird seal, but a new iron chain hung across its doors. A guard leaned against the wall, chewing roasted corn. Amara approached. "The grain was promised yesterday." "Then yesterday has passed," the guard said. "People have not eaten." "That is not my problem." Mosey noticed something unusual. The guard's sandals were clean, although the road outside was covered in red dust. His horse stood behind the storehouse, and on its saddle was a rolled receipt bearing the name of a wealthy merchant. That night, Mosey followed the guard. The man rode beyond Kembe to a ravine where 6 covered carts waited beneath thorn trees. Each cart was loaded with grain. A second rider met him there, wearing the black sash of the royal treasury. "Move the carts before moonrise," the rider ordered. "The northern estates are paying double." "The villages will riot," the guard warned. "Let them riot. By the time the king hears of it, the council will have restored order." Mosey crouched behind a rock, his heart beating hard. He wanted to step forward and reveal himself, but a king who exposed himself too early might catch one thief and lose the entire network. He reached for the small knife hidden inside his walking stick, then remembered Amara's warning. People like him carry the king's authority. At dawn, he drew a map in the dust and marked the ravine. Amara studied it. "You have done this before. I have watched roads. You watched those men last night." He looked at her sharply. She shrugged. "A traveler does not return with red thorn scratches on his sleeves unless he has been walking where travelers should not walk." "Would you believe me if I told you the grain is being stolen?" I already believe it. Why? Because hungry people do not become hungry by accident when storehouses are full. They decided to travel to the old Senga Dam, where the kingdom's largest water channel began. The palace records stated that the dam had been repaired before the drought. If that were true, the river should still be reaching the southern provinces. Along the road, they passed a procession of wagons heading away from the villages. Amara stepped into the road. "Where are you taking the water?" The driver did not answer. Mosi climbed onto the nearest wagon and lifted its canvas. Beneath it were sealed clay jars, each marked with a blue line. A royal guard drew his spear. "Get down!" Mosi noticed that the jars were wet on the outside. They had been filled recently. "Water from Senga?" he asked. "Private shipment. During a drought?" The guard's spear moved closer. Amara took Mosi's hand. "Leave it." The wagons continued north. They walked behind them until sunset and found the route ended at a stone compound surrounded by guards. A painted sign announced that it belonged to the House of Daran, the kingdom's richest trading family. Amara looked toward the compound. "How can one family own water?" Mosi answered quietly. "Perhaps they do not. Perhaps someone is selling it to them." "Who?" He thought of Lord Cato's calm voice in the council chamber. No official report. That evening, they camped beside a dry stream. Amara placed 2 small stones over the fire and warmed a handful of beans. Mosi watched her divide the meal into 3 portions. "There are only 2 of us," he said. "The third is for tomorrow." "You believe tomorrow will feed us?" "I believe we should not steal from tomorrow before it arrives." He smiled faintly. "You speak like a queen." Amara laughed. "Queens do not sleep beside dry streams." "Perhaps the best ones should." She studied him in the firelight. "Who are you really, Mosi?" He could not answer. Before he could change the subject, horses thundered in the darkness. 5 men surrounded the camp. Their faces were hidden by scarves, but each wore the same blue thread around the wrist. The leader pointed at Amara. "You are coming with us." Mosi stood. "Why?" "She has been asking questions about the dam." "And if she refuses?" The leader smiled. "Then you will learn how quickly a poor traveler becomes a dead traveler." Amara whispered, "Do not fight." But Mosi had already seen the leader's sword. It was a palace weapon. The king moved before the man could raise it. He struck the wrist, twisted the blade away, and sent the leader into the fire. 2 attackers rushed him. Mosi blocked one and kicked the other into the dust. Amara grabbed a burning branch and swung it at a horse. The animal reared, scattering the men. "Run!" she cried. They fled into the darkness while arrows struck the ground behind them. When they finally reached the ridge above the river, Amara looked at him with fear and surprise. "You said you were a traveler." "I am." "Travelers do not move like palace guards." "No," he said. "Sometimes palace guards move like travelers." She did not laugh. Far below, the Senga River glimmered beneath the moon. A wall of stone blocked its natural path. A new channel carried the water north, away from the starving provinces and toward the estates of the wealthy. The drought was not merely being endured, it was being managed. The next morning, Maleko and Amara reached a hillside village where an elderly woman named Nalia allowed them to rest. Nalia had once worked in the palace kitchens and recognized the way Mosi he. "Your hands are too clean for a farm worker," she said. "Amara has done most of the work." "That is not what I mean." Maleko lowered his gaze. Nalia stirred porridge over a weak fire. "When I served the late king, He used to visit the kitchens in disguise. Did he? He wanted to know whether the cooks liked him. What did they say? They said he was generous with gold and terrible with salt. Amara laughed, and even Maleko joined her. Nalia's smile faded. His son does not visit. The king felt the words enter him like cold water. Perhaps the new king is busy, Amara said. Kings are always busy when the poor are waiting, Nalia replied. That afternoon, a messenger arrived carrying a sealed royal notice. The notice declared that any person spreading rumors about grain theft or water diversion would be arrested for treason. Amara read it twice. The king has made a mistake, she said. Maleko looked at her. You speak boldly about him. I speak sadly. Why sadly? Because I used to believe a king was the father of everyone in the kingdom. Now I think he is only the father of those who can reach his table. Maleko had no defense. That night he told Amara the first part of the truth. I know the palace, he said. How? I was raised there. She waited. My father served the royal family. I grew up among officials and guards. Were you an official? Something near it. Something near it is not an answer. He looked at the flames. I was a messenger. It was a lie, but not a complete one. Before he became king, Maleko had indeed carried messages through the palace corridors. Amara looked disappointed, but she did not press him. You should tell the truth before it becomes too heavy to carry, she said. The following day, they descended toward the old Senga Dam. The main gate was protected by soldiers, but Nalia had given them the name of a retired engineer who lived nearby. His name was Osei. Osei opened the door only after Maleko knocked 3 times. You should not have come, the old engineer said. We need to know who changed the river channel, Amara replied. Osei looked at Mosi. And you need to know whether your king signed the order. Maleko stiffened. Osei noticed. Do not worry. I have no love for palace secrets. Inside the house, he unrolled an old engineering plan. The original dam had 3 channels, designed to distribute water equally among the northern, central, and southern provinces. A new line had been drawn in black ink, redirecting most of the water north. Who authorized this? Maleko asked. Osei pointed to a signature. It belonged to Lord Kato. The minister told the king it was temporary, Osei said. He said the north had stronger harvests and could provide grain later. Did it? No. The grain was sold across the border. The water was sold to private estates. Amara's face went pale. How many people know? Enough to be afraid. Not enough to be safe. A sound came from outside. Osei extinguished the lamp. Through a crack in the shutters, Maleko saw men surrounding the house. One carried the same blue thread bracelet as the attackers from the stream. Osei whispered, They found me. Amara searched the room. Is there another exit? Under the floor. They crawled through a narrow passage as the door splintered behind them. The tunnel opened beside the dam, beneath a stone bridge. From there they watched soldiers enter Osei's house and drag the old engineer away. Maleko's jaw tightened. We have to help him, Amara whispered. If we go back, they will take us too. You are willing to leave him. I'm willing to stay alive long enough to expose them. Amara turned away. The king had chosen strategy over courage, and he knew she would remember it. By sunset, they had reached the southern road. Maleko sent a secret message through a trustworthy courier to Captain Jabari, ordering him to investigate the dam and arrest no one until proof was secured. But the courier never reached the palace. Lord Cato read the message first. He recognized the private cipher used only by the king. The minister looked at the words, then smiled. "Your Majesty," he whispered, "you should have stayed behind your walls.